Hello and welcome. This is Cheryl. I'm so glad you stopped by. In this video, I'm going to show you using Magicals powders on a Gelli plate. Now, I've just recently gotten into the Magicals powders and I was curious what would happen if we used them on a Gelli plate. So I have a 5x7 plate here. I'm using two different types of paper. On the ones that I'm using sprays and water to liquefy the Magicals, I'm using some mixed media paper that's a manila color. And on the ones that I'm using paint or mediums to pull the print, I am using just printer paper. So I have the Autumn Leaves Magical set. I've got all 5 colors out here and I put the lids beside them because the powders themselves don't really show you what the color is. So I just wanted to make sure to know what color I was using when I was using it. And I'm actually going to use all 5 colors for most of the prints, especially at the beginning, just to see what they do, how they play. Every print is not going to have the exact same ratio of each of the colors, just because sometimes I'm a little bit heavier with some than others, and sometimes I'm not. So as you can see, I'm using a fan brush here to put the powders on the plate. The first print I'm doing, I'm just using water to mist and to liquefy those powders, and I'm going to pull it up with some of my mixed media paper, and there ends up being enough liquid on there that I pull a second print just to get some of that liquid off of the plate. And you noticed I did push my powders to the side there just to make sure that I wasn't getting them misted with some overspray. Wanted to make sure to keep them protected. So that was the second print there. So I'm going to use just a baby wipe. You could also use just a wet or damp cloth or whatever. I'm going to clean off the residue and then try another print. Now I have my plate on an old Cuttlebug plate, and the reason I like that is if I happen to do something where I want to lift it up and move it around and move the liquid around, I am able to do that. I end up not doing that, but I always put this size plate anyways on the plate just because it gives you a little bit more flexibility if you ever wanted to lift it up or if you wanted to check what the print was doing. So once again, I'm using all 5 colors on here. I'm just dusting them over and then moving them aside to protect them. This print I'm using some dylusion spray. I'm just using white dylusion spray. I don't want to change the colors of them, so I'm just using white. And once again, lifting it up with the mixed media paper. I was curious what that white spray would do to it. And it just gives it a more opaque, kind of frosty look to it. Once again, I'm taking a second print to get some of the excess of the liquid off of the plate. And I love with the second print how it's not really a full print. You get some texture in there. It's just a little bit interesting. And that's a comparison of the first print and the second one. So I'm going to do the same thing again, clean off the extra residue, and then start putting all of the powders on again. Now in this video, I'm only pulling the prints off of the Gelli plate. I didn't want to have a video that was like an hour long. So I'm going to take these prints that I've made and create cards with them and just do a second video with some of the cards that were made and likely showing you how some of them were made. But this way you can just see just the prints and then see the final result in another video if you're interested in how I use them. So the next spray that I'm going to be using is the Dina Wakley gloss sprays. It has been a very long time since I've used these sprays, so I think it's a little bit clogged and the spray didn't really want to come out at the beginning. In the end, it worked fine. There's really not a huge difference between what the gloss sprays looked like and what the dilution sprays look like, other than the fact that it has a glossy sheen when you look at the print. The white pretty much did the same thing to the Magicals powder. They kind of give it a frosted, a little bit more opaque look. But I'm glad I tried the 2 different sprays just to see what happened. Once again, doing a second print. And there we go. Again, it doesn't look like much difference from the dilution sprays. This one I obviously had a little bit more spray on there, so it's a little bit more liquid. Cleaning off the plate again. and then putting all of the powders once again on the plate. For this one here, I'm going to use some white acrylic paint to pull the print. And I have a 6-inch sprayer that I'm using to put the paint all over the Magicals powders in order to pull them up. I like using a 6-inch sprayer because then I don't really have brayer marks in my print. I'm going to use the printer paper to pull it up. And I have to say, I'm not as fond of the way the paint worked with the powders. Likely would work a lot better if I didn't use 5 different colors, but it ended up kind of being a grayish, muddy color. You could see a little bit of the colors, but it definitely wasn't one of my favorites. All right, let's put some powders on the plate once again. No need to do a second print there just because there's no moisture on the plate. In this one, I'm going to use some gloss gel medium. So with the gloss gel medium, I was curious how different it would look from the white paint just because it is clear. And I do think it does look a little bit different when I first pull the print, but once they're dry, really the only difference that is evident to me anyways is the print itself has a bit more of a glossy finish to it, whereas the paint has more, I want to say, of a satin finish to it. So just using that brayer to spread it around, and I try not to spread it more than necessary, but I do want to have an equal layer of medium over the whole thing. Again, using the printer paper to pull the print. So when they're wet, the colors do look a little bit brighter, but once they're dry, I can't really see a huge difference other than the finish. And for this one, I'm going to try a combination of both the white paint and the gloss gel medium, just to see. At this point, I didn't know how they were going to look when they were dry, so I was curious how it was going to look with a combination of the two. And in the end, oh, actually, no, this one I did just the blue and the green rather than using all of the colors. So once again, getting a nice thin layer of the medium and pulling the print. And I actually really liked how just the 2 colors looked in this rather than all 5 colors mixed. Really not a surprise, but there we go. And obviously there's a little bit of other colors that are there from before. So this one here is the one where I'm going to mix both the paint and the gel medium. And in the end, once they're dry, the only difference you can really tell is there's part of the print that has a bit more of a glossy finish to it. The difference seemed to be a little bit more evident when both of the mediums were still wet on the plate than that it did once the print had actually dried. But once again, when you're curious about something, always best to just try it out and see what happens. And that way you have your answer. So I'm just taking some of the excess paint off my brayer before brayering everything out, and I'm trying to get kind of a mix. I don't really want to have the gel medium and paint just in certain sections. I want it kind of all over the print. Once again, using the printer paper to pull the print. And I like to rub it just to make sure that the paper has really good contact with the Gelli plate before lifting the print. And I clearly used a lot of medium, so I needed to grab a second piece of paper to pull a second print from there to get some of that off of the plate. And I actually like the second one a little bit better just because there was less of the paint and whatnot on there. And at this point, I thought that I was done with using the brown, the orange, and the crimson. I figured I'd just do a few more with just the blue and green since I liked that color combination there. So I'm going to put just the blue and green on the plate. So these tubs of Magicals, they're not really very big, but you can see that you don't actually use a whole lot of them. So they really go a long way. You can get a lot of projects done with them. And I like how they've got a shimmery effect right in them. So there are some that are flat that don't have any shimmer to them, but I really like how these ones have the shimmer right in them. And it just gives it a really nice print. So I've got my blue and green on there. I'm just using some water, and I'm also using the dilution spray to have a combination of those there. I'm just curious what the difference or how the print would look with that. Once again, have my mixed media paper to pull the print. And when it's wet, you see a little bit more of the white and the spray, the difference, or the water difference. Now taking a second print to get some of that excess off of there. I really like the randomness of these second prints here. So I thought I was done, and then while waiting for those prints to dry, I thought, you know, I really love using alcohol inks on my Gelli Plate. I wonder what would happen if we mix them with alcohol ink prints. So this is the experiment. So I've got two 5x7 plates here. On the one on the left, I'm using the crimson, the brown, and the orange magical powders. And on the one on the right, I'm using the blue and green magical powders. Now my Gelli Plate on the right has a green tone to it because at one point I used alcohol inks, green alcohol inks, at full strength, and they stain the plate. It doesn't affect the jelly printing at all. It's just stain the plate. Still works exactly the same. So I've put my powders on the plates. I'm going to close the pot so I don't get any alcohol ink or overspray in them as I'm working. On the plate on the left, I have a jar of Salmon alcohol ink that's been diluted with isopropyl alcohol. There's about 1/4 of the color and then the 3/4 of just isopropyl alcohol. I do this to lighten the color because I don't want the color of the alcohol ink to completely overpower what I'm doing. And rather than putting the alcohol ink and mixing isopropyl alcohol with it afterwards, I figured I'd pre-mix a bunch of different colors. On the one on the right, I am using Aqua alcohol ink that is mixed with isopropyl. Same proportions, 1/4 of the color to 3/4 isopropyl alcohol. I did mist some more isopropyl on the one on the right to dilute the colors a little bit. So on this one, I've got the Gelli plates just on some plain printer paper so that you can see the colors on the plate. I don't have them on an acrylic block so that I can move them around. I do need to wait till the inks are completely dry before moving to the next step. So now they're pretty much dry on the one on the left. Some of those darker colors are a little bit wet, so they will blend with the acrylic paint that I'm using to lift up the print, but that's okay. So I'm using my 6-inch sprayer again. I'm just spreading the acrylic paint. I'm using white, but it is coloring with the alcohol ink and the magical powders. And I'm going to use some printer paper to lift up the print. So once again, you want to make sure that you have good coverage, or make sure that paper really has good contact with the acrylic paint. And I love the way this turns out. Now I'm going to take some of the excess paint off of my brayer and then do the one on the left. Trying to get as even a coat as possible. And again, brayering off excess paint off of my brayer, and then using some printer paper to pick up the prints. Now you can see on the one on the right, I still have some paint and whatnot left on my plate. I'll use a little bit more paint to pull that off. So that is the first print from the one on the left. I'm just adding a little bit more paint, and then I'm going to pull the rest of that paint off. And I love, for these ones here, I love the second prints because they're a little bit more grungy, a little bit more of a not overall print, if that makes any sense. I'm sure it will once I take the prints up in a second. But to me, that just looks so much more interesting. And I think those are going to be really, really cool backgrounds for cards. And there's the one on the left there. Love how that looks. So I wasn't quite done. I'm going to do exactly the same procedure, same colors. But for these ones, I'm going to add some metallic alcohol inks as well. So on the one on the right, I'm putting the blue and the green magical powders. I'm going to use the Aqua alcohol ink that is diluted with some isopropyl. And I'm also going to use some opal Pinata alcohol ink mixative. It's got like an opalescent shimmer to it. And on the one on the left, I'm using the red, brown, and orange magical powders. I'm adding the Salmon diluted alcohol ink. And then for that one, I'm going to add some Pinata brass to it. And even though these magicals have a little bit of shimmer to them already, I just thought this would add just an extra element of shimmer to them. And I really like how they ended up turning out as well. So still adding the powders. And I'm going to let you just watch till we get to the end. So now I'm going to add the Pinata brass to the Gelli Plate on the left. And what I like to do is add drops of it, and then I'll go back with the alcohol ink color and put drops of that over top of it as well, just to kind of dilute it. I find if you don't do that, you get pretty much dots of the color. So I do like to kind of break up those dots and let that alcohol ink metallic mix a little bit and flow a little bit on the plate. So the opal Pinata, I've only been able to get it in a really big bottle, so I've gotten it, some of it in a small bottle, just so that I have a little bit more control when I'm putting it on my plate. For this one, rather than drops, I kind of just swirled it around. And once again, I'm going back with the alcohol ink color to try to break up the shimmer color. I find this one pretty much stays where you leave it no matter what you do, but I do like to try to expand where it goes a little bit. Once again, once I have these done as I like, I need to let them dry completely. The alcohol ink has to completely dry before we go and pull the print. So the alcohol ink has completely dried. It usually takes about a half an hour to an hour, really depending on how much isopropyl is added. But you do want to let it completely dry, and there's not really a way to speed up that drying time. When I first started playing around with it, I tried with a heat tool, and I found it made the alcohol inks almost beat up a little bit. I just didn't like the way it looked. And by letting them dry naturally, I found that the effect was much nicer in the end. So I'm taking my printer paper. I've just used white acrylic paint on here to pull the print. And now making sure that I have really good contact between the paper and the acrylic paint. And pulling that first one there. And I love the little bit of extra shimmer that opal gives it. And then this one here with the brass. And you see how the dots don't really move a whole lot. They kind of stay where they are. I still love it. So now I'm adding a little bit of extra paint to pick up some of that excess paint that's left on the plate. You could always leave it and have it there for your next jelly printing session, but these second prints are the ones that I tend to like most, so I really like getting them off. To me, they're a little bit more unusual, a little bit more interesting. Another one, that one's going to be really cool on the background of a card. And another one there. I love, love, love that one. So gonna try take one more print off of them. I'm not sure there's much left on this plate, but it's always fun to be surprised. So add a little bit more acrylic paint. Nice thin layer. You don't want to add too much, because if you add too much, basically all you're picking up is the paint. You're not picking up the alcohol ink and the stuff that's left on the plate. And I had to end up cutting another extra piece of printer paper for this. No, actually I grabbed one of my scrap papers that I was braiding off on because I ran out, but you're never going to see that backside, so it's all good. Love that one too. That one's going to be so interesting as a background card of a card. And look at that one. Very cool. Very unusual. So once again, this is just a run through all the different prints that we've made. I'll do a next video with the different cards that are made from these prints, but these ones are all completely dried now. And I'm actually showing them to you in order of how they were done, the method of which they were done. No, that one was out of order, so that one was done first, and then the second print, or the next print, is the second print of it. And then some of the ones with the sprays. Really happy with the different variety that you get with the different mediums used. So let me know down below which one was your favorite. Which one did you like the results of the most? I'm really interested if your favorites were my favorites or if you have a different favorite. And thank you so much for spending your time with me and watching. If you enjoy this type of video, please hit the subscribe, the like. Let me know that you love this type of video so that I know which ones people are enjoying. And I can't wait to see what the cards look like with these prints. I think some of them are going to be so cool and fabulous. And that is the last one there. You have a fabulous day. Thank you so much for stopping by.